And thank you to the Office of Senator Kiko for hosting this presser for us.
We're live now.
Welcome to this press conference on the petition against the implementation of the Anti-Terrorism Law. Good afternoon, I'm Anna P. Santos, and I am your moderator for this afternoon. This morning, constitutional framers, human rights defenders, and journalists filed a petition before the Supreme Court to stop the implementation of the Anti-Terrorism Law. This brings the number of petitions against the Anti-Terrorism Law to 15. More petitions against this law are expected within the coming weeks. So this afternoon we have 10 panelists today, the petitioners, the signed petitioners of the anti-terrorism law, and I will be opening this forum by introducing each of the panelists. I'll be reading an introduction, after which I will invite the panelists to kindly share a short opening statement. After that, we will open the floor to questions from our journalists who are in this Zoom call. First panelist I'd like to introduce is Attorney Lutz Barbo, who served as the Secretary of the Senate of the Philippines from year 2000 to 2001, and again from 2016 to 2018. Mr. Barbo has co-authored a book and wrote several articles published in PDI and the Manila Times. Sir, may I invite you please to give your opening statement?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Thank you very much for inviting me. And I have been talking about the junk terror law. And I hope the Supreme Court will listen to us. So far, that's all that I can say for now. But I remember, if you will allow me a few minutes more, I remember when I was president of the Philippine Normal University, there was a publication of Human Security Act, the making of Human Security Act, authored by Nene Pimentel, Senator Nene Pimentel. I used to read that book. In fact, I was asked by Senator Nene Pimentel to go over that book before it was finally published and printed in the Philippine Normal University. I think there is one glaring omission, or it was left out from the Human Security Act, and that is that for every day that a person is put to jail via this Terrorism Act and wrongly detained, 500,000 pesos would be fined, or 500,000 would be fined. And I think that was taken out in the new anti-terror law. In other words, law enforcement officers will be emboldened to arrest unreasonably, knowing that they will not be fined for every day for wrongful detention and arrest, 500,000 pesos or 500,000 pesos every day. But that is not anymore in the anti-terror law. And I'm happy to be with my classmates in the Parliament of the Streets. And they are the honorary students in the Parliament of the Streets. Dean Chell, I'm happy to be around, and of course our fighting newspaper woman, and of course the famous Ed, our idol in the Parliament of the Streets. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Sir Barbo, and for giving us your opening statement about the fine for wrongful detention has been removed from anti-terrorism law. And I think that's one of the main points that the petitioners are questioning about its constitutionality. I'll go to our next panelist, Dr. Florangel Rosario Bridget, who is a member of the 1986 Constitutional Commission and President Emeritus Trustee and Senior Advisor of the Asian Institute of Journalism and Communication, as well as a regular columnist of the Manila Bulletin. Sir, may I invite you please to give your opening statement? Is
I don't think she's
here?
around yet. Yeah.
We'll come back to Sir Braid later. Attorney or Dean Chel Jokmo is our next panelist. He's a law professor, human rights defender, and the author of several books. And if you follow people on Twitter, you'll know that he was given the hashtag Ngipin ng Batas. He's also a frequent lecturer and speaker in legal and non-legal forums and events. Dean Jokmo, please.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. I think we can all agree that the freedom of speech is the cornerstone of our democracy, that without the ability to speak truth to power, all our other rights really mean nothing. And even in terms of our courts, the Supreme Court has zealously guarded the freedom of speech, our freedom of assembly, our freedom to express ourselves and of the press in all these decades that the court has been addressed with these problems. We are going back to the court today. We have gone back to the court today to ask the court actually to continue that protection that is given to our freedom of speech. And in the face of a law that we believe will really threaten to wipe out these basic freedoms that we all cherish. It's a law that I think we would, those of us who are here as petitioners and or as counsel, is not really intended for its purpose, but rather for, in terms of a way of silencing the people into servility. Anyway, I won't go into the merits of the petition. It's there, and we're excited to be heard by the court. But I am at least cautiously optimistic that we will be able to bring these arguments successfully to the court. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Jokno. Our next panelist is Ms. Sarah Stoyo, columnist of the Philippine Daily Inquirer, also an author of several books on contemporary political and social issues, as well as a multi-awarded journalist. Ms. Stoyo.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, po.
Can you hear me?
Yes, po.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. I'm joining this petition because I believe this law poses clear and imminent danger to freedom of expression. I like the word that was used there. It is like a sledgehammer that's going to pounce on us. We've been through this during the martial law years, and we have documented it well. We have documented it well in the book that I put together. So we don't want this to happen again, and we would like more and more people to know about this, and I'm glad we are among the daring people to go to the Supreme Court to challenge this evil law. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, ma'am. I'd like to introduce next Professor Edmundo Garcia, who's a member of the 1986 Constitutional Commission, also an author of several books about the process of building peace. Professor Garcia, may we invite you, please, to give your opening statement?
Thank you very much. I am very grateful for this opportunity. First of all, I wish to greet my fellow petitioners. It is a real honor and privilege to be amongst you. Among you are very courageous men and women who have been in the forefront of the struggle for our rights during the past several decades. And I am proud to be part of this petition. I have with me one of the few original copies of the 1987 Constitution. And the reason why I want to show it to you is because one of the main reasons why I joined this petition is because I believe that the Bill of Rights is the bedrock of our democracy. And in particular, Section 4, which deals with our freedom of speech, of expression, of the press, of the right of the people to peaceably assemble. Those are sacred freedoms. And secondly, the other very important section in the Bill of Rights is Section 2, which in my experience, in the first quarter storm, and then later on in the People's Power experience, which precede just before the People's Power experience during the martial law period, I recall very much the dreaded arrest, search, and seizure orders, which allowed arrest or arbitrary arrest of people, who fought repression. And I do not want us to go back to the 1970s. We should move forward, especially in this time of pandemic. So just to be brief, I already issued my own statement, and I hope you can circulate it. Just to be very brief in this opening round, I just want to summarize. In my belief, the Anti-Terror Act will achieve three outcomes. It will silence dissent. It will facilitate arbitrary arrests. And thirdly, it will paralyze people in a period of pandemic, in a time of a triple crisis involving health, the economy, and a climate of uncertainty and fear. And therefore, those of us who are co-petitioners, we need to catalyze three responses from our people. One, speak out. Two, stand together. And three, sustain courage. Laban lang. Laban lang. Thank you. Salamat.
Thank you, sir. Laban lang. Next on our panel is Professor Rachel Khan, who's a professor at the UP College of Mass Communication, where she currently serves as Associate Dean. She has authored several books on media literacy and journalism. Professor Khan.
Greetings to my fellow petitioners and to everyone here. I am happy to be part of this group of petitioners. I believe in protecting the basic human rights of free expression, free speech, and the freedom of the press. And it seems that more than being directed to a well-defined concept of terrorism, the law seems to be targeted to anyone who dissents or calls government to task for what it should be doing for its service to the people. And for me, it delivers a chilling effect, especially for those of us in the field of journalism, who simply want to do our jobs as watchdogs of society and of the people. So thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you, Professor Khan. Journalism is not a crime. Senator Francis Kiko Pangilinan, President of the Liberal Party of the Philippines, senators who voted against the law as a bill before the Senate. Senator Pangilinan, may we please invite you to give your opening statement.
Thank you very much, Anna, and good afternoon to everyone. Yes, we voted against this measure precisely because we believed that a number of provisions of the Constitution have been violated, particularly the Bill of Rights, and therefore we cannot in conscience support and therefore voted against it. We also believe that voting against it is one way of showing opposition to this unconstitutional measure, but exhaustion of all remedies available to us is also the reason why we decided to bring the matter before the Supreme Court and for the Supreme Court to intervene. The Liberal Party is one of the opposition parties today in the country, and our fear is that this law will be used to stifle dissent and those in opposition to the administration. In the last 3 years, the Liberal Party has been accused of being involved, falsely accused, of being involved in Austerplas, in sedition, in attempting to bring down the government. What is to stop this law if abused and taken advantage of to label us as terrorists? And therefore we feel and we believe that this is the right course of action, to question the legality of this law and to prevent the abuse that we fear will happen should we not show our opposition to the anti-terror law. And our experience in the Philippines is that the iron fist, mailed fist, draconian policies have never or have failed to address the more serious problems of the country. And COVID-19 and the spread of the virus is precisely Exhibit A, that all these draconian measures, this iron fist policies, this militaristic approach has failed to address the health and economic crisis that we now face. And only the broadest unity of various sectors will effectively oppose tyranny and the abuses that may follow suit after this law is implemented, or when this law is implemented. Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone.
Thank you, Senator Pangilinan. Next, I'd like to introduce Maria Ressa, Chief Executive Officer of Rappler, and Maria, we all know, was given a verdict of guilty for cyber libel a few weeks ago, and today I believe, Maria, you were just arraigned on your charges of tax evasion, one of the many charges that have been filed against you and against Rappler. May we have your opening statement, Maria?
Sure. I feel like, Cassandra, I've been jumping up and down for 4 years. I think, we need to make sure that we see the world as it is, not as we would like it to be or wish it to be, right? Because right now, if you look at it, Sarah's other guy showed a book. Here, this is the book I'm reading right now. The Phoenix, you're seeing the saga of the Lopez family. And the reason I'm reading it is because I want to understand. I've looked at it, the context of history on Tim Snyder's work in terms of how do you fight tyranny. And one of the first things he said is, in the 20 prescriptive things, he said, do not voluntarily give up your rights, right? Well, this 2-volume book showed me how so many of the same conditions in the 70s are in play today. A collapsing economy, a military and police structure that is essentially under an executive man, right? Our president. We have ABS-CBN shut down. Wow. Who would have thought? Could it have been possible at any other time? Yes, it happened in 1972. And just a week ago, President Duterte said, he was very proud because he said, I did it without having to declare martial law. He called them the oligarchs. Ironically, that's the same script that Marcos used. So for me, all the alarm bells are ringing. And of course, all of the cases, the weaponization of social media, the weaponization of the law. This one, the Bayanihan Act, we shortened it to BAHO, the Bayanihan Act, to Heal as One Act, was the kind of beginning of the codification into law of the random abuses of power that we have felt in the last 4 years. But the anti-terrorism law gives that. It is it. So you've already had, Rachel talked about a chilling effect. Forget chilling, we're in Siberia. And if we're not taking the temperature, we won't react in the right way. I'm not an alarmist. Many of you who know me know I'm not an alarmist. But reading the tea leaves, living in the present, shows you we have no choice but to protest, to sign, to demand that the Supreme Court do something about something that is so blatantly unconstitutional. I'll end with just this one thing. President Duterte is the most powerful leader our nation has ever had. He says it, he's certainly more powerful than Marcos. He didn't have to declare martial law to get the same results. But I would say this is the reality we live in. Essentially, it's a dictatorship masquerading as a democracy with rule of law. The captured legislature that delivered the votes against ABS-CBN makes that clear.
Thank you, Maria. Next is Erin Tanyada, who served as the representative of the 4th District of Quezon Province from 2004 to 2013. Sir Erin.
Thank you, Anna. And like everyone else, the anti-terror law is a measure to skirt protected constitutional rights. And this is a clear indication that the president and his cohorts would not want to follow constitutional provisions leading to the declaration of martial law. With the anti-terror bill, we can already say that martial law is here. So the effects of warrantless arrest, which we experienced under the martial law regime, the Presidential Commitment Order, Presidential Detention Act, and the arrest seizure, search and seizure orders, all issued by the executive without any review by the judiciary, are again being put into play if we do not stop the anti-terror law from being fully implemented. So I join with all the other petitioners in saying that we are in dangerous times and we should all be united and stand up against this law. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ma'am Etta Rosales, who served as the chairperson of the Commission on Human Rights from 2010 to 2015 and served as the party list representative of Akbayan's Citizen Party List in the 11th to 13th Congress.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. Thank you. And good afternoon to all our friends out there. I joined the petition because I can feel it. I can feel what's happening right now. And after all, not too long ago, we suffered under the dictator Marcos. So that, how do I look this ATA, this terror law? I look at it as a gunshot approach by government to silence perceived enemies of the people, of the government, especially at a time when people are starting to wake up and recognize and learn all about their rights and freedoms. That's exactly what it is. There's just one point that has to be known by the people. Very important. The people are in favor of democratic rule, but they must learn to understand that the underpinnings of democracy necessitate separation of powers of three co-equal branches of government and the principle of checks and balance with cooperation, collaboration for good governance. However, Mr. Duterte gradually, vindictively, and with no hesitation has eroded bits and pieces of this principle of separation of powers. So that when we say we must fight for the right to free expression, concomitantly, we must also fight for the right to know, to access information. And believe it or not, from day one to the present, Senator Kiko knows that very well. This has been denied. Even the Senate, the House of Representatives, they just submit to the president. But even in the Senate, when they tried to access information like SOCO reports, the spot reports by the Philippine National Police, profiles of cases, 27,000 strong, the government just refused to give in. And that is a constitutional right of the Senate. Same with the CHR, the same with the Ombudsman. So I won't go any further, but I feel that these erosions of democratic rule, of the separation of powers, must be known by the people. Because once the people understand that they have the sovereign will to fight, and that once upon a time they were able to do it and win against a tyrannical dictator like Marcos, there is no reason why we should not come together and show the way. That's all.
Thank you, Ma'am Etta. I'd like to go back to Ma'am Florangel Braid. Thank you, Ma'am, for joining us. I'd like to introduce Ma'am Braid as member of the 1986 Constitutional Commission, and we'd like to welcome you to kindly give your opening statement. Ma'am, nakamute po ata.
Okay. Yeah. Here is my frayed copy of the Constitution.
Wow.
It's a blatant violation of the Bill of Rights, human rights, and many things else. But I'm joining the petition because I think, although we may need an anti-terror law, although I don't think we do, if we do, we need a less punitive anti-terror law and more preventive. And I think we have to focus more on education, on how to prevent and how to lessen intolerance and also growing gaps between the poor and the rich. In other words, we don't need an anti-terrorism law. We have enough problems. We have yawning gaps between the rich and the poor. We have creeping authoritarianism. We are still a very immature democracy. And what else? We're in a pandemic, and here we're being faced with a very draconian law. No? Now, I'd like more clarification if we do have a law on the definition of terrorist. Who is a terrorist? When I was reading the bill, I thought I was a terrorist because I've been very critical many a time, no? And so what happens to people like us, no? Would really be silenced. No? So that's one. Two is, I think, given this, we need to really examine how we can improve democracy in the country. I think many of us are so concerned about the creeping authoritarianism, the decline of democracy, and this even worsens these fears, So, given all of these problems, I think we should think twice, and I hope the Supreme Court would listen to our plaints. So, thank you. I know there are many other speakers, but in other words, in short, we don't need an anti-terrorism law.
Salamat po. So those are our panelists joining us this afternoon. We're going to open now the floor to questions from the media. Just kindly send a message so that we can properly queue the questions. Before I read out the first question, I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of our lawyers from the Free Legal Assistance Group, Attorney Ted Te and Attorney Rafi Aquino. afternoon po. We're ready to take questions from our friends from the media. I must say it's kind of it's that was just something that I felt was very moving. All right. I have a few questions. We can throw this to the panelists. They've been sent to us. What do you think are the chances of your petition and other petitions stopping the implementation or the enforcement of the anti-terrorism law? We can, Sir Edmund, I hear you chuckling in there. Maybe you want to give us your insight on this. What chances do we stand in?
Ted, who was in the Supreme Court, has the better view. I was just that's my my own private thoughts. Anyway, Ted or Chel or Rafi, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, sir. Well, let's put it this way. In recent memory, I don't remember a law that has been met with as diverse, as loud, as comprehensive, and as united an opposition as this one. If I remember correctly, probably the last one would have been the Cybercrime Protection Law in 2012, where there was also a deluge of petitions challenging the law. That by itself, of course, does not predict the chances of the petitions being filed in court. But I think the court being a human institution, peopled by human beings who, contrary to what many may think, actually do listen to the news, read the newspapers, go online. They would probably deny going online to read some of the online sites that they would not want to be associated with, but they do. And so they are aware of what's going on. And so they read opinions, they read and they hear about contrary views. So I am pretty sure right now the members of the court are probably already chewing on the various opinions that have been circulated. And so that by itself would probably have an effect on as they vote, as they think about the petitions. So, as a lawyer, I would, every time we file suit, we would probably, put forward, of course, we would put forward the best arguments that we think are available. And every time we would hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. So I think that's our stance now. We hope for the best, but we are prepared for the worst. Meaning, if the court denies, then we should be ready to take on what comes next. But of course, we're hoping for the best, that the court will give us a fair shake, meaning read and consider the arguments presented by all the petitions that have been filed so far, and as prayed for in this petition and in other petitions as well, hear the arguments in orally, meaning call for oral arguments, so that these arguments can be ventilated and they can ask any questions they may want to have. Maybe Chel or Rafi would also have their own views.
Well, this court is one of the most beholden to the executive. But still, we have to do this. Now, apart from being in this for the win, it is also writing for future generations, so that it will not be said that we gave up on our rights, on our democracy. And specifically for the post-2022 regime, this should be addressed as well. It's been a pleasure and honor writing such a distinguished group of petitioners and for our constitutional rights. As we wrote the petition, we found ourselves relying heavily on precedents, judicial precedents, that ran a course very closely tracking the course of our political history. And really, they could be summed up in 4 words. It's speaking truth to power. So thank you for the opportunity. And I am not that optimistic, but we are still hoping for a win.
Thank you, sir. Attorney Jogna, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that's I'm fine with the Feds and the Rafi's answers.
Thank you. I'd like to call on Ms. Bonice. Yes, sir.
That's just, I've said this before, why we do what we do. We do this not because of the certainty of victory, but because the certainty of our beliefs and our conviction. And we hope that the Supreme Court will give us the chance to argue this and then hopefully see the validity of our arguments. Thank you.
Ma'am Etta, I think wants to say something. If we could please unmute Ms. Etta's mic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I just want to add that, historical experience shows that, as I said, people are now being aware. But they have to know, they have to have access to information. And Duterte knows that, so he's repressing media. Inquirer, Rappler, and now ABS-CBN. Who knows what's next? But as people become more aware, and I think this was very impressive, this deluge of petitioners. This was capped, I think, by the former Supreme Court justices. So I got several calls, even with that, because people were amazed and impressed by the number of petitioners and from sectors, the different sectors, from where they came. And so that I do agree with what Rafi was saying. Part of it has to do with strengthening the awareness of the people and their sovereign will. Because what ousted the dictator was not an election legally. It was, in fact, a popular uprising. But you combine both. We do the legal, but we have to bring about the political. We always have to link the political awareness of the people. So that to me is, when you say, do you think it has a chance? Maybe it's not just the Supreme Court, it's also the people. And the informed citizenry that will be talking about this during this time. That's it.
Salamat po, Ms. Etta. Miss Ceres, Ma'am Ceres, can we kindly unmute the mic? Veron, if we could please unmute Ms. Doyo's mic. I can't do it from my end.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes po.
Yeah, in 1984, more than a dozen journalists, we all marched to the Supreme Court to challenge the military because we were being interrogated one by one. So we went to the Supreme Court to make them stop. Of course, the main respondent was General Ver. And we won. What I'm trying to say is that you have to push it to the edge. You cannot just sit back and say, this will stop. So that's what we did. And it is very well documented, and we made it to the headlines, and they stopped. But of course, by then, I think about 10 of us had already been interrogated. But we didn't want to take it sitting down. So we went to the Supreme Court and we won. And they said, no, we will not do it again. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, if nobody else would like to add to that, I am going to call Miss Bernice. Okay, she's asked me to please read out her question. Miss Bernice Nair from Business Mirror is asking, what does it mean to have two framers of the 1987 Constitution join this petition, considering that the core of the argument is the unconstitutionality of the anti-terrorism law? Sir Edmundo, if we could kindly unmute his mic. Yes, sir.
As I mentioned earlier, and I showed you one of the original copies of the Constitution, as my colleague Flor Angel Braid already did. As I said, the Bill of Rights is the bedrock of our democracy. And at the same time, it's important to remember that without the freedom of speech, if the government tries to silence dissent, facilitate arbitrary arrests, and to paralyze people into inaction, then we have to do something. As framers of the Constitution, there are two phrases or two things I want to share which is relevant. One, text without context is pretext. You see, what is the context today? When we framed the Constitution in 1987, the backdrop was martial law, dictatorship, and we wanted to move away from the conditions and the setting of that period. Today, what is the context? We have the planting of evidence, as amply demonstrated by Amnesty International's report. We have the killings of mere suspects in urban poor areas. And we had the cold-blooded murder of 4 military men in Jolo by the police. These are but recent cases of deeply flawed enforcement of the law at the hands of those who have become lawless in our midst. In other words, it's important to realize that we have weak institutions and we have deeply flawed implementation and enforcement of the law. And that's the reality we live in. Secondly, the second phrase I want to share actually comes from one, in my years of youth, I listened to the Bee Gees. And one of the phrases in one of their songs was, words are all I have to take your heart away. In other words, what the law has are words. And therefore, how do you interpret the words? The struggle for interpretation. How do you define terrorism, speech crime, inciting to terrorism? I think our great lawyers, Chell, Ted, and Rafi, they put in our petition, the example of the call of cardinal sin, to convene, to converge at EDSA in 1986, which we followed. How about the CBCP, the Catholic Bishops' Conference call led by Bishop Angbo on July 16th, the Feast of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, calling for prayer and at the same time denouncing the anti-terror law? Could that be considered speech crime? Or how about Angel Locsin, urging the people, to stand up against the closure of the ABS-CBN after the charade of the House 70? Or how about, my fellow petitioner, the father of Erin, Bobby Tañada, the revered Senator Tañada? We put our letters together and we, under the rubric, reinvent resistance. Would that be classified a speech crime. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that people online or offline, journalists like yourselves, the 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 tendency or the temptation to go on self-censorship, to go to self-inhibit is one of the possible outcomes of this. That's why when I summarized earlier, I said what this law will most probably accomplish, is actually to silence dissent, to facilitate arbitrary arrests, and to paralyze people. Obviously, my co-petitioners are different kind of people in the sense that they have the courage. Like Maria. Maria's a symbol of courage. Like Kiko. But especially Kiko, your daughter. Your daughter, she's braver than most of us, Or like Shell, Shell especially, who is able to put things in a, that's why I wrote a piece in Inquirer, if you remember, in praise of janitors. Because the president called you a janitor. And I said after that, in praise of janitors. And so what I'm trying to say is that we have to inspire, we have to uplift our people. Because if some of us don't, do something, don't take risks, don't show courage, then as Abraham Sarmiento said, sino pa? Kailan pa? Kailangan tayong kumilos. Kaya para sa akin, when I was abroad most of the time, but during the pandemic, I was able to watch this teleserye, A Love to Last. Ang sabi ni Anding, tandaan mo niyo si Anding, sabi ni Anding at yung Agoncillo family, tandaan ba niyo yung teleserye, A Love to Last? Sino ang pangalan ng artista na yun? Si the girl, si Bea Alonso. Sabi ni Bea, laban lang. And so, para sa akin, that should be our battle cry. Laban lang, huwag tayong matakot. So, that's my response from the point of view of one of those who drafted the Philippine Constitution. And that's why what I have here is this. Mabuhay, the Bill of Rights, 1987 Philippine Constitution.
I think Ms. Braid would like to add something. Can we unmute?
Yes. Yes. Context. We are joining the petition because we want to defend democracy. If you remember the Declaration of our principles, the first section says the Philippines is a democratic and republican state. In the 1973 and 1935 Constitution, it did not have democratic, it only had republican. And so when Commissioner Ople asked why are we adding democratic, and the answer was because the Constitution is based on participatory democracy. So the whole essence of the Constitution is participation, people power. After EDSA, we said never again, people will speak. And so what we are defending now is the voice of the people, the freedom of speech, which is the essence of participation.
Okay. Salamat po.
Yeah.
Today is the first day that the anti-terrorism law would take effect. We'll throw this question to the panel. What are some practical tips that you can give to those listening and to the general public about how we should be online and offline with respect to speaking truth to power?
Let me start, if I may. I think we should, the number one thing is we shouldn't censor ourselves. As long as we stick to legitimate criticism, that is clearly and definitely protected speech. So any matter of public interest where we want to express our opinion is protected speech, and we should not allow any law or anyone actually to inhibit that speech. course, we have to understand that there are certain limitations on speech. For example, libel, inciting these political crimes. But at the same time, especially to those who are here who are experienced in journalism, we know what those limits are. We know that those boundaries are very difficult actually to cross. As when we talk about what is happening in the country, when we speak about what we feel, what we believe, what our vision of the country is, then there should be no limit as far as our expression is concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Trinchel. Very good reminder about our protected speech, what constitutes protected speech. Ma'am Etta?
Yes, I agree with that. The self-censorship is so inviting when you have a president who threatens you and does not mince words when he talks about what he plans to do and what he intends to do. But that attitude can only grow stronger if we are able to gather more people together and see the collective, the consequence of collective effort. So, to me, I would like to say that education is so important. Education and the history of what is past to the ordinary people. Because as far as ordinary people are concerned, they don't, they have no, the ATA, the charter change, hindi eh. Wala silang trabaho. Gutom sila, and so on and so forth. So, I think education must explain exactly the economic situation that we have. Context, as Ed was saying a while ago. The context of the coronavirus and the need for us inclusively to help bring about a solution to the coronavirus, and then to criticize government with the kind of policies that it comes up with. So the middle class must really play a very important role. I'm teaching right now, so I do not stop from egging without nagging my colleagues, my faculty members, that kailangan kumilos tayo. And then let us explain in simple language what the people have a right to know. Because, as I always say, only an informed and enlightened citizenry that can be committed can bring about the kind of change that we want, whether in government or out of government.
Thank you, Ma'am Etta. Are there any other follow-up comments from the group, Maria?
I'll just quickly add the biggest difference is technology. I think it's enabled the fast rise, the erosion of our freedoms in plain sight. It helps manipulate our people, all of us included, everyone on Facebook, right? Facebook is a behavioral modification system, and it essentially takes the data you put in, which is you, what you post. Machine learning and artificial intelligence knows you better than you know yourself, and micro-targeting allows Facebook to serve your most vulnerable moment to a message, whether it's a company or a government, to serve your vulnerable moment to that message and change the way you think. Astroturfing, manufactured consensus. This is what is happening to us. We are being manipulated. The facts are there. And it's not just happening to the Philippines, it's happening all around the world. But what this does for the Philippines, for us, is that how can we have a democracy if facts are debatable? Journalists, how can we give the facts to our people when not only do we have greater danger just speaking up against power, trying to hold power to account, we place ourselves in greater danger. The mission is more important, but our people don't necessarily see it because the distribution platform actually prioritizes lies laced with anger and hate. So we have watched this for the last 4 years. So that's part of the reason, signing this petition is only one of a few things. This codifies the abuses of power. It changes. It's the first, it's actually the second. It's a huge signal that we are changing in plain sight. To just last words here is that your job as journalists, your job as lawmakers, Kiko, and everyone, the challenge is so much bigger than it was in the 70s. So much bigger, because not only is vast power when government uses every lever of power to consolidate power, and it happens in plain sight, and we get used to it. We must speak up even more today than ever. We must. Otherwise, we will lose our democracy.
Thank you, Maria.
Just very quickly, I'm sort of an incredible thought that who would think that what I used to say 30, 40 years ago, I'm saying again today. Rights aren't rights unless they're fought for. And so precisely this anti-terror law, under the context of the current authoritarian regime, would want all of us to keep quiet and not to speak out. Well, in the context also of what's happening in our country in terms of COVID and the economic crisis, probably the worst since World War II, arguably. This is the fight of our generation. And no way will I stay silent as we fight.
Thank you, Senator Kiko. There are no more questions, I think, but if there are any last words from any of the panelists before we close. Okay. I would just like to summarize some of the points that that our panelists shared with us today. We must speak out, we must stand together, and we must be courageous. We shall not voluntarily surrender our democracy and our sacred freedoms, which two of our panelists today, as part of the constitutional framers, shared with us. These are enshrined in the Constitution, and there's a physical book for that even. It's different to see it like that. And lastly, we must fight. Okay, laban lang. We do not do this because of the certainty of victory, but because of the certainty of our beliefs. Thank you everyone for joining us. This is Ana P. Santos. It's been my pleasure to be your moderator this afternoon.